Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Ben, and welcome to part 4 to my platform shooter series. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a basic artificial intelligence, and that's about it. Let's get started. First, come into sprites, and we're going to duplicate the sprite solid and double click on it and name this S_enemy. I'm going to edit the image and just make this enemy red. Close out of this. Close out. Well, let's give it a center origin. Now this enemy is going to be a flying enemy, and the reason I'm starting with a flying enemy is because it's not necessarily because it's that much easier, but because I feel like it's a little bit more straightforward, and I also feel like with this game where the character can aim in any direction, having enemies that fly is a little bit more interesting. That's not to say that we won't add enemies that walk on the ground later, but for now I'm going to start by adding a flying enemy. Let's add an object, create an object, name this O_enemy. And assign this red sprite. Okay. The first thing we need to do is come into our player object, and we're actually going to be creating our very first script. Now a script is just a piece of code that can be run from any object inside of our game. And the reason we're going to be creating a script is so that we can reuse our collision code. So if we come into the player's step event, you can see we have a very useful bit of code right here that handles the collisions. So I'm going to actually press Control X to copy this, and then I'm going to right click on scripts over here to create, and I'm going to name this script. If I come into here, I can rename it move, and I'm going to add 3 slashes here. Add a parameter. Well, actually we don't need parameters, so we should be good. I think we can just put in our move code right here. Okay, so this script now contains all of the logic we need for moving and colliding with the solid. The benefit of this is when we come back into our player, we can just call move right here with a semicolon. And if we run the game, it should run exactly the same way it did before. Only now all of that code is inside of this script. And let's see if it works. Yep, we're looking good. We can move around and shoot. Now our enemy can use this same script to move and also collide with walls. So let's close out of our player right here. And we're actually going to need some of these same variables, but we won't worry too much about that right away. Let's come into our enemy object, add an event, a create event. And we'll just say initialize the enemy. We'll say hSpeed underscore equals 0, vSpeed underscore equals 0. And just to reiterate this, we're using the underscore because the built-in hSpeed variable right here, if you were to set this, it would automatically move the object without even calling our move script, and that would cause us some issues. We'd lose some control. So we're using the underscore and creating our very own variable that gives us complete control over this object. Now we can add an event, and we'll add a step event. And inside here, we'll say move towards the player. Now, the easiest way to get a motion towards the player is going to be similar to the way that we were able to use the length dir functions with our bullet. So we're going to say, first let's get a direction to the player. Var dir equals point direction. And we want to point from our position to the player's position. So we'll do our position is X, Y. the player's position is O underscore player dot X, O underscore player dot Y. Once we have that direction, then we can use that to update our horizontal speed and vertical speed. So h speed right here, speed equals length dir, and the length that we want to move is going to be the speed that this enemy moves at. So we don't actually have a speed, so let's come back into our create event and add a speed underscore. We don't want to use the built-in one because that will move without us calling the move function. Speed equals, let's do 3 and we'll see how that works. Okay, so the length that we want to use here is our speed. So we'll say speed underscore, and the direction we want to use here is just dir, which is the direction to the player. Now we'll say vSpeed underscore equals length dir, speed underscore, and dir. So how does this work? Well, it uses our direction and our speed in order to create a horizontal and a vertical movement amount. So we're converting from a direction and a length, which is the speed, and we're changing that into an X and a Y value, basically. And if you remember from when we used the bullets, it's actually the same thing. Only with the bullets, we were checking to see where we wanted to create the bullet. But now we're checking to see how much we want to apply to our horizontal and vertical speed. Now we can just call move, which is the same script. But the benefit of this is now our enemy should collide with walls. And we can come into our room here, double click on that, drag in a few enemies. Now if you've noticed, you have to click and drag new enemies in, and that can be a little bit annoying. Once you've selected an object over here, you can actually hold the Alt key, and it allows you to just click in the room and place multiple objects in the room. So we've got some enemies, and let's see how well they move towards us. You can see they'll move towards us, but they also collide with the walls. Now, they do tend to go inside of each other, and then it makes it look like there's only one enemy there. But we can fix that. So let's add a new collision event in the enemy. Let's come out of our room here, close out of this, come into our enemy, and I'm going to add an event, a collision event, and do object enemy. So this code will be run when the enemy collides with itself. So I'm going to call this a soft collide, because this won't actually prevent the enemy from going inside of the other enemy. It will just try and move outside of it. And the reason we're doing that is because it creates a slightly better effect when you've got moving elements in your game. Instead of forcing them to never move inside, which can cause kind of jumpiness, we're going to just make them so that they can collide and move inside of each other, but then they kind of push away and attempt to move outside of the other object. And the easiest way to do this, we're actually going to copy this code right here where we're moving towards the player. And instead of moving towards the player, we're going to move away from the other enemy. Let's just see how this looks, actually. So inside of our point direction here, the direction that we want to point is going to be from the other enemy's position to our position. That would be away from the other enemy, right? So we're going to say other.x, and other is a variable that is inside of the collision event that references the other object you're colliding with. So we'll say other.x, other.y, x and y. So that points from the other object to us. And we're still moving with the speed, but we might want to move a little bit faster this time. So let's just do 5 here and see how this looks. And I don't think it's actually going to look that good. And you can see that's really jumpy, and they appear to not be going inside of each other at all, which is not what I described. Let's see what happens when we use the speed variable again. This should move them out of the collision at the same speed that they moved into the collision. And it's still kind of jumpy, but you can see one of the benefits of this system, even though it's jumpy right now, is that it's technically never pushing the enemies inside of the wall. So it technically does work in that sense. It just doesn't look very good. Now if we do a lower value than speed, so if we do something like 2 here, this isn't going to work either, because then they're still going to end up moving inside of each other eventually. Well, apparently not. Apparently they're able to move outside still. That's not the behavior I was expecting. And our object here isn't solid, so that's very interesting that is the case right there. But I'm going to show you here in a second how we can do this and not have... See, there we go. That's more what I was expecting. They can kind of move inside of each other now. It still looks kind of jumpy, though. It doesn't really look that good. So the problem is that the variables we're using here, the h speed and the v speed, are getting reset every single frame. And the reason they're getting reset is because we're setting them right here. So when we're in the step event, we're setting the h speed and v speed, but then inside of here in our collision event, we also set them. And so it's kind of overriding the other variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some new variables here inside of our enemy. We'll just call this h speed push, set equal to 0, v speed push, and set that equal to 0. So we've got these two new variables here that are designed for the push that we're going to have. Now what we're going to do is inside of here, instead of updating the h speed and v speed, we'll update the h speed and v speed push. So this way we don't override the other ones. But instead of just setting them equal to this right here, and I'll just show you what this does, because it doesn't change a lot. We're also going to need to come into our move, and we're going to actually duplicate this script. Duplicate. And we're going to name this, we'll rename this new one. Rename move push. Okay? So we've got a new script called move push that has the same values as the move one. But we're going to change these. So instead of using h speed and v speed right here, we're going to use h speed and v speed push. And I'm going to do Control R, and that's going to add a find and replace here, because I don't want to go through and replace them all manually. So we just do Control R, and we can do h speed underscore should be replaced by h speed underscore push underscore. And then we should be able to replace them. I think maybe this. Let's see. Okay, there we go. This one only does the current one you're on, I guess, and this one does them all. So I ended up doing it multiple times here, so we're going to have to get rid of some of these. But that did appear to work. So now we're going to do v speed and v speed push, and just press this right here, which must stand for all. I'm guessing that's what the A stands for. There we go. It updated them all. Okay, so now we have our new script here, the move push, and inside of here we can call move underscore push and run the game. Now it's not really actually going to do anything different right now. It's a little, yeah, it's basically the same. And the reason that it's not different is because we're still actually, we're just setting the h speed and v speed push every single frame to 1. But what we want to do is we want this to be additive. So each frame that you're inside the enemy, it actually pushes more and more. And that's why we created our own variables here that we can use, because now instead of just doing equals, we can do plus equals. What this will do is if our h speed push right here is equal to 1 on a certain frame inside the enemy, then on the next frame it could be equal to 2, and then on the next frame it could be equal to 3, and on the next frame it could be equal to 4. So they're going to gain speed and go faster and faster outside of the other enemy. And let's run this right here, and you can see. And you can see they gain quite a bit of speed and they start to move away from each other faster, which looks a lot worse, right? That does not look good. And the reason is because we only call the move push script when we're actually colliding with them. So let's move that. We're going to move this into our step event, and we'll call it right after the move. Okay, so we're going to call move push. Now watch what happens. This isn't what we want either, but it's kind of fun to watch. You can see they get pushed away from each other, but then they keep the momentum of the push. It's almost like it's pool or something. They keep the momentum from the push. And that's actually pretty good. That's closer to what we want. But ultimately, we also want to make sure that these variables right here, because they're getting to like 20 and 30 and they never get reset. So what we want to do is we want to say, well, if we're not actually colliding in here, then we want to reduce these. And the way we can do this is we can say if place meeting with the object enemy, and we're actually going to say not place meeting, so put an exclamation mark. So if we're not colliding with an enemy, h speed push equals lerp h speed push. The target value will be 0 and the amount will be 0.1, I guess. We'll try that first. V speed push equals lerp V speed push. Target amount will be 0 and we'll do a percentage of 10%. And it seems that, oh, there we go. That cleared up. So now basically we're adding a friction to this pushing speed that we had. Okay, so we've added this friction. Now they push outside of each other, and then once they're outside of each other, the friction kind of stops. They're still a little bouncy. You can see they kind of bounce off each other quite a bit, but it's a lot better than what we had before. If you want to make this even softer, you can change this value and make it lower. So let's say we do 0.25 for the push amount here. Okay? This is quite a bit softer. Now they're going to go farther into the other enemy. And it's kind of a softer bounce. But it still works pretty well. They're still trying to get to the player. But they can't push each other into the wall either. They never actually go into the wall. And this is looking better and better. You could even lower this more just to see how that looks. And you guys can play around with these values to see which one you like the most. Now let's give our enemies a health. So let's, inside our create event, we're going to create a new variable inside the enemy here, and we'll name this health underscore. Once again, we don't want to use the built-in health because this is actually a global variable. At least it was in 1.4. I'm not 100% in GameMaker Studio 2. But we don't want to use the built-in health, so we're going to create our own. We're going to set our health equal to 4 for now. Then inside of our step event, we're going to say at the very end, so this will be move, this will be push force, This will be our move force. This will be our push force. And then we'll add another one inside of here called death. Nice and happy. We'll do if health underscore is less than or equal to 0, instance destroy. We'll destroy this instance if its health is less than or equal to 0 and save. Now what we want to do is we want the enemy to have a collision with the bullet. So add a new event. We'll do a collision with the bullet. We'll call this take damage. We'll say health minus equals 1. So we'll subtract 1 from our health. And then we'll destroy the bullet. And the way we can do this is we can call instance destroy. And then you can pass in a argument into the instance destroy, and we'll do other right here, which means the bullet, the thing hitting us, is the other object in the collision. Okay? Now, if you're in GameMaker Studio 1.4, this is going to be a little different. You can't pass in a variable into the instance destroy function in GameMaker Studio 1.4. So the way that you'll do it is you'll do with other instance destroy, like this. This is how you'll do it if you're using GameMaker Studio 1.4. But in GameMaker Studio 2, we can pass in a variable for what we want to destroy, and that's a lot cleaner in my opinion. So let's save the game and run it. Now our enemies should take 4 bullet hits before they die. And you can see we're able to kill them. They do move pretty fast, but that's easy to change because we created a speed variable. So I'm going to set the speed to 1. Now you can see better that they're dying with 4 shots. We'll do this one right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it dies. Okay, well that's all for this lecture. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you found it useful and learned something. I've got new videos on the way. We'll improve the enemies. We'll give them some sprites, make them so they can attack the player. That's all in future videos. I really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, be sure and give it a like and favorite it. And I will talk to you guys later.